Hello and welcome to my third devlog for my indie game Pantan. I apologize for the fact that this episode is a bit late, but I had some real-life issues to address first. I've improved on the controller a little bit. It's a bit smoother and jumping is much more responsive and easier to control. Since I'm already talking about the controller, I just want to show you something that I didn't show in previous devlogs. The player character was never hard-coded. I can easily make multiple characters and switch control between them. The other characters that aren't used simply default to an idle state. This will be important for a few mechanics later in the game. One of which will allow you to control different characters, like statues, to solve some puzzles. I've upgraded the terrain system to now change the entire lighting of the scene based on the terrain. I've even created a custom fog system that I'll showcase a bit later in the video. The terrain also affects the characters moving on the terrain. It affects speed, acceleration, deceleration and the maximum jump height. This will be important when I create a weather system. Let's say rain starts falling in the desert. The sand will get wet after a while and it will start to slow down your character. The change will also affect lighting, making the whole system a lot more immersive for the player. I've had an issue where in some scenarios the seams between terrains would become visible, and I've had many problems with that issue, but now it's finally fixed and seams between terrain chunks are no longer visible. Since wind is one of the most important mechanics in the game, I made a simple particle effect that displays the direction of the wind. I'm gonna upgrade the effect as it's pretty much a placeholder as it is now. The slide mechanic has also been improved. It's much more responsive. The player has more control over the movement and it's overall much more enjoyable to use. I've made another minor tweak to the slide mechanic. Now it's only possible to start sliding if the wind is strong enough. If you're behind an obstacle or inside some sort of cover, it isn't possible to start sliding. The air movement has also been improved a bit. It's easier to use and feels smoother. I've finally created a prototype for the hubs in the game. They will play a major role since the game won't have a way of fast traveling, nor will you have a map. Hubs will have objects that will allow you to check your current position. They will also allow you to change the direction of the wind and use a new mechanic that I am gonna showcase a bit later in the video. The grass system has also been greatly improved. It's much faster and looks better. The deformation is a lot more stable and realistic, and the growth effect adds to the look of the game. Since I've made the grass system better, I decided to make a tree shader and use the same growth system for the tree. Both the grass and the leaves on the tree are affected by the wind. Wind is now completely dynamic. It works in a similar way to the old system but allows for the wind direction to be changed. Everything you've seen in the past devlogs still works with this system, just better. The wind direction can be changed at these pillars that can be found at the hubs. I was thinking about placing some sort of mini hubs throughout the map to make it a lot easier to get by if the map ends up being too big. The wind change affects the particle effect, cloth, all foliage and the umbrella mechanics. Since maps won't be a thing in the game, I decided to create a new mechanic where you can climb up to a vantage point and use that point to survey the surrounding area. The little flag on top is an indicator that the mechanic can be used there. Showcasing the new fog system before the new survey mechanic wasn't a good idea since it's not too prominent while the camera is at a default angle. It made the survey mechanic look a lot better, and it's going to work well with the weather system I have in mind. Changing terrains also affects the fog. Even though the pillars are merely placeholders, they are using a custom shader. I've adapted the tessellation shader that I've used for the ground system to work on normal meshes, and these pillars are highly tessellated just to showcase the new shader. I didn't mention this until now, but the ground system now supports height mapping. All clips since the beginning of this episode have been using a height-mapped terrain. It's hard to notice due to the fact that the height map is pretty shallow and the fact that I'm using an orthographic perspective. The orthographic perspective is pretty much the reason why I am using mostly shallow height maps. Even though it's a major system change, for a minor visual change it makes everything look more realistic. Since it supports height mapping, I needed a way to create height maps. They had to be seamless so that my terrain chunk stitching would work, so I've created an editor window inside Unity and made a small height map generator. I've even found a way to make different height maps seamlessly connect to each other, but since I'm already late with the devlog, I decided to postpone that. After I generate the height map, I simply save it and plug it into my terrain generator. That's also a new Unity editor window. The generator has the ability to turn the terrain into extremely small chunks. The minimum chunk is a single triangle. This increases the performance by a huge margin because most chunks get culled by the default frustum culling Unity does, thus lowering the polygon count that's being calculated every frame. The optimal chunk size depends on the resolution of the terrain. Too small chunks help the GPU but mess with the CPU since there are too many objects. Too big chunks mess with the GPU but don't make the CPU handle too many objects. The border normals of the generated terrain seamlessly tile to another terrain, allowing shading to be seamless across chunks. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you like my content and want me to make more videos. Feel free to comment if you have any ideas that could improve the game. Cheers.